The metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as Sheriff Sheila tightened them with unnecessary force. Around us, shoppers had stopped to stare, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. My heart hammered against my ribs as humiliation burned through me. "You think you can damage county property and walk away," she snarled, her badge glinting in the afternoon sun. "Not in my town." I looked down at my spotless bumper, then at her cruiser. Not a mark on either. The absurdity of the situation might have been laughable if not for the very real weight of the cuffs around my wrists and the crowd of witnesses watching my public degradation. "Sheriff, please," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Check your dash cam, check mine. There was no collision." Her smile chilled me to the bone as she leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "Dashcams malfunction all the time, but my report, that will be permanent." That was when I realized this was not about a fender bender. This was about power. It began with an ordinary Saturday morning, the kind where the air smelled of freshly cut grass and possibility. I had been planning a bathroom renovation for months, watching tutorial videos and slowly gathering courage to tackle it myself. That weekend was finally the time to begin. My list was simple: pipe fittings, grout, and a new shower valve. I pulled into Millbrook Hardware at 10:15 in the morning. The parking lot was half full, weekend warriors like myself, gathering supplies for household battles against leaky faucets and drafty windows. I found a spot near the back, away from the chaos of shopping carts and hurried customers. Inside, the familiar scent of sawdust and metal greeted me. I moved quickly through the aisles, checking items off my mental list. The store clerk, an older gentleman with calloused hands and kind eyes, helped me find the right valve. "First time replumbing?" he asked, nodding my hesitation. "That obvious," I responded. He chuckled. "Everyone starts somewhere. Take your time, follow the instructions, and you cannot go wrong." With my purchases secured in a heavy orange bag, I headed back to my car. The entire stop had taken perhaps 10 minutes. I placed my items in the trunk, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine hummed to life. I checked my mirrors, clear on all sides, and began to back out slowly, cautiously, as was my habit. That was when I heard it, a sharp, commanding voice that seemed to slice through the parking lot. "Stop right there." I braked immediately, startled by the urgency in the voice. In my rearview mirror I saw her, Sheriff Sheila Blackwood, our town's most notorious law enforcement officer. She was storming toward my vehicle, her hand resting purposefully on her belt. My window was already down due to the pleasant spring air. I leaned out slightly. "Is there a problem, Sheriff?" Her face was a mask of stern authority. "You just backed into my patrol car. Step out of the vehicle immediately." Confusion washed over me. I had felt no impact, heard no collision. Nevertheless, I turned off my engine and stepped out, my movements deliberate and non-threatening. Sheriff Sheila stood with her feet planted wide, one hand still hovering near her weapon as if I might suddenly become dangerous. "Sheriff, I did not hit anything," I said calmly, walking toward the back of my car. "Do not move," she barked. "Stay where you are." I froze in place, raising my hand slightly. "I just want to check my bumper." "I will handle the inspection," she replied coldly. She circled my vehicle, examining my rear bumper with theatrical thoroughness. I remained where she had ordered me, increasingly aware of the small crowd beginning to gather. Saturday shoppers paused, grocery bags in hand, to watch the drama unfold. "There is your point of impact," she announced, pointing to my pristine bumper. I squinted, seeing nothing. "May I look?" She gestured impatiently. I approached my own car, examining the bumper carefully. Not a scratch, not a smudge, nothing out of place. "Sheriff, there is no damage here," I said. "The damage is to my vehicle," she countered, walking toward her cruiser parked several spaces away. I followed at a respectful distance. Her patrol car sat gleaming in the morning sun, its black and white paint job immaculate, its chrome fixtures catching the light. She pointed dramatically to the front bumper. "Right there," she declared. Again, I saw nothing. No dent, no scratch, not even a speck of transferred paint. "Sheriff Blackwood, with all due respect, I do not see any damage, and I did not feel any impact while backing up." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Davis?" "No, ma'am. I am simply stating that I did not hit your vehicle." She reached for her radio, never taking her eyes off me. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Blackwood. I need backup at Millbrook Hardware for a property damage incident." My stomach dropped. This was escalating quickly and unnecessarily. The crowd of onlookers had grown, their whispers forming an unsettling soundtrack to this bizarre confrontation. "Sheriff, this is unnecessary. I have a dash cam. We can review the footage right now." She ignored me completely, pulling out a notepad and beginning to write. "License and registration," she demanded. I retrieved the documents from my car, my hands slightly trembling now, not from guilt, but from the public spectacle she was creating. Around us, people had their phones out. I was becoming the unwilling star of Millbrook's latest social media sensation. Sheriff Blackwood took my documents and continued writing, her pen scratching across the pad with deliberate strokes. A deputy's car pulled into the lot, lights flashing but siren silent. The situation had officially transformed from annoying to alarming. "Sheriff," I tried again, "my dashcam will show there was no collision." She looked up finally, her eyes cold. "Mr. Davis, in this town I determine what happened, not you, and certainly not your camera." The deputy approached us, hand casually resting on his holster. He was young, perhaps mid-20s, with a military-style haircut and the overly serious expression of someone new to authority. "What's the situation, Sheriff?" he asked, deliberately keeping his voice official for the benefit of our growing audience. Sheriff Sheila straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Davis here backed into my cruiser and is now denying it. I need you to take photographs of both vehicles for the report." The deputy nodded and proceeded to photograph my bumper and then the sheriff's cruiser, dutifully documenting damage that did not exist. I stood silently, watching this theater of absurdity unfold around me. "Deputy," I said when he finished, "did you see any actual damage in those photos you just took?" Before he could answer, Sheriff Sheila interjected. "That will be determined by the department mechanics, not by civilian opinion." She turned back to her notepad, completing what I now realized was a citation. The crowd had thinned somewhat, but several people remained, watching with the uncomfortable fascination of those witnessing someone else's misfortune. "Here you are, Mr. Davis," she said, tearing the paper from her pad with a flourish. "This is your citation for property damage to a county vehicle. You will also be hearing from the county insurance adjuster regarding compensation for repairs." I took the paper, my fingers numb. "Sheriff Blackwood, I would like to formally request to see the damage I supposedly caused." "That is not possible at this time. The vehicle is now considered departmental evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Investigation," I echoed. "This is about a non-existent fender bender." Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, Mr. Davis. Interfering with an officer's duties can lead to additional charges." I took a deep breath, centering myself. Sheriff, I have video evidence that contradicts your claim. Would you like to see it now? That got her attention. A flicker of something, concern, perhaps, crossed her face before she reassumed her mask of authority. What video evidence? She demanded. I pulled out my phone and opened the dashcam app. My dashcam records front and rear views continuously while I drive. It also records for 30 minutes after I park. I played the footage from just minutes ago. My careful backing up, the complete absence of any collision, and Sheriff Sheila approaching my vehicle afterward. The evidence was irrefutable. She watched without expression, then looked up with a dismissive wave. That footage is inadmissible. Civilian recording devices are not calibrated or certified for evidentiary purposes. But surely it proves there was no collision, I pressed. Mr. Davis, she said, her voice now dangerously quiet, I suggest you take your citation, contact your insurance company, and consider yourself fortunate I am not adding charges for disorderly conduct. Are we clear? The deputy shifted uncomfortably behind her, avoiding eye contact with me. I folded the citation and placed it in my pocket. Perfectly clear, Sheriff. She nodded curtly and turned away, signaling the end of our encounter. You are free to go. Those words, free to go, as if she had been doing me a favor rather than fabricating an incident from thin air. I drove home in a state of disbelief, the citation burning a hole in my pocket. That afternoon, I visited the sheriff's station to file a formal protest. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, took my statement with obvious disinterest. Someone will contact you, he assured me without conviction. No one did. I called 3 times over the next 2 days. Each time, I was transferred to voicemail boxes that were apparently never checked. The 4th time, the receptionist recognized my number and informed me that Sheriff Blackwood was unavailable to discuss ongoing cases. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was my insurance agent, Martin Ellie, a man who had handled my policies for over a decade. Robert, he began, his tone already apologetic, we have received an incident report from the county sheriff's department regarding a collision you were involved in. Martin, that collision never happened, I explained, the frustration evident in my voice. I have video evidence proving it. I believe you, he said, but procedure requires me to process the claim as submitted by law enforcement. Until it is formally dismissed, I have to adjust your policy accordingly. Adjust how much? I asked, dreading the answer. Your premium will increase by 22% effective immediately. The injustice of it struck me like a physical blow, based on a false report. Based on an official report from the county sheriff, he corrected gently. Robert, my advice. Fight this through proper channels. Get a lawyer if you have to, but I cannot ignore an official accident report. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the citation. Sheriff Sheila's signature was bold and sweeping across the bottom, the signature of someone accustomed to their word being final. But not this time. Her lie was now costing me real money, hundreds of dollars in increased insurance premiums. This was no longer about pride or principle. This was financial harm based on a fabrication. I smoothed the citation on the table and made a decision. Sheriff Sheila had picked the wrong person to bully. That evening, I cleared my dining room table and set up my laptop. If this was going to become a battle, I needed ammunition, evidence so compelling that even Sheriff Sheila's badge could not dismiss it. The dashcam footage was my starting point. I downloaded the entire file to my computer and began analyzing it frame by frame. The video quality was better than I had expected, clear enough to show not only the absence of impact, but also the significant distance between my vehicle and the sheriff's cruiser at all times. I marked key timestamps: 10:27:14, me backing out slowly; 10:27:22, the point where Sheriff Sheila claimed impact occurred; 10:27:30, sheriff approaching my vehicle. At no point did the cars come within 3 feet of each other. But I knew this would not be enough. Sheriff Sheila had already dismissed my dash cam as inadmissible. I needed corroboration from sources she could not so easily discredit. The next morning, I returned to Millbrook Hardware. The store manager, Kevin Preston, recognized me immediately. "You are the guy from Saturday," he said, his voice lowered conspiratorially. "The one Sheriff Blackwood stopped." "That would be me," I confirmed. "Kevin, does your store have security cameras covering the parking lot?" He nodded slowly. 4 cameras, 2 at the entrance, 2 covering the lot itself. "Would any of them have captured what happened on Saturday morning?" Kevin glanced around, then gestured for me to follow him to his office. Inside, he closed the door and spoke in hushed tones. "Everyone in town knows how Sheila operates. Been meaning to say something for years, but—" He shrugged, the universal gesture of the powerless against authority. He turned to his computer and pulled up the security footage from Saturday. The angle was perfect, a wide shot capturing both my car and the sheriff's cruiser. We watched together as I backed out, stopped at her command, and exited my vehicle. The distance between our vehicles remained consistent throughout, at least 5 feet of clear space. "Could I get a copy of this?" I asked. Kevin hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Give me your email, but listen if anyone asks." "I never saw you," I assured him. That afternoon, an unexpected message appeared in my social media inbox from someone named Thomas Whelan. The message was brief. "Saw what happened at the hardware store. Sheriff's been pulling this stuff for years. I was standing right there. She's lying." I arranged to meet Thomas at a coffee shop 2 towns over, away from prying eyes. He was a construction worker in his 40s, with calloused hands that wrapped nervously around his coffee mug as he spoke. "Been living here all my life," he told me. "Watched Sheila work her way up from deputy to sheriff. She's always had these methods. Targets outsiders mostly, but sometimes locals who cross her." "Would you be willing to sign a statement about what you saw?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Been waiting for someone to stand up to her. Just never had the guts to be that person myself." By Wednesday evening, I had assembled a compelling case: my dashcam footage, the store's security video, and Thomas's signed statement. But I needed more than evidence. I needed a strategy. I remembered Marion Everett, a former colleague who had worked in the mayor's office before moving to the county clerk position. We had served on a community fundraising committee together years ago. If anyone understood the inner workings of town politics, it would be Marion. We met for coffee the following morning. Marion listened intently as I laid out what had happened, occasionally shaking her head in a mixture of disgust and resignation. "Robert," she said when I finished, "Sheila has done this kind of thing before. There have been complaints, quite a few actually." "Then why is she still sheriff?" Marion sighed. "Small town politics, the right connections, and most people just pay the fines and move on. It is easier than fighting." "Well, I am fighting," I declared. Marion studied me thoughtfully. "The mayor is concerned about Sheila's methods, but he needs political cover to act. What you have here," she gestured to my folder of evidence, "this might be exactly what he needs." "How do I proceed?" I asked. This cannot just be a legal fight, Marion advised. Sheila controls too much of that process. This needs to become public, a community issue. People need to see what she is doing. I considered her words carefully. So I need to go public with the evidence. Marion nodded. And when you do, you will not be alone, trust me on that. As I drove home, a plan began forming in my mind. Sheriff Sheila had used her authority as a weapon for too long. It was time to shine a light on her abuses, not just for myself, but for everyone she had targeted over the years. This was no longer about clearing my name. It was about reclaiming our town. I spent the next 2 days preparing my case for public viewing. This would not be an angry rant or personal attack. It needed to be measured, factual, and undeniable. I created a simple website titled Transparency in Millbrook Law Enforcement and carefully uploaded my evidence. First came my personal account of the incident, written without emotional language or accusations. Just the facts: time, place, circumstances, and Sheriff Sheila's actions. Next, I embedded the dashcam footage, split screen with the hardware store security video, synchronized to show multiple angles of the non-existent collision. I included Thomas's statement, with his permission, and a timeline of my attempts to resolve the issue through official channels. Finally, I added a simple question: does this seem right to you? With a deep breath, I posted the link to my personal social media page and several community forums. Then I waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had been shared hundreds of times within our small community. Comments began flooding in, not just support for my situation, but similar stories from others. She gave my son a ticket for running a stop sign on Cedar Street. There is no stop sign on Cedar Street. Sheriff Blackwood impounded my car for suspected drug residue that miraculously disappeared before the inspection. She threatened to arrest me for interfering when I recorded her deputy being rough with my elderly neighbor. Story after story poured in, creating a damning portrait of systematic abuse of power. People I had never met reached out privately, offering their own documentation, citations that made no sense, charges that were dropped once challenged, threatening statements made when no one else was listening. By the second day, local blog sites had picked up the story. Citizen evidence contradicts sheriff citation, read one headline. Another was more direct: pattern of abuse. Sheriff Sheila's traffic stops questioned. Even the local radio station, usually careful to avoid controversy, mentioned it during their community news segment. A local resident has raised concerns about citation practices in the sheriff's department, providing video evidence that contradicts an official report. The comment sections on these stories filled with even more accounts. Former residents, now living elsewhere, added their experiences from years past. What had begun as my personal grievance was rapidly exposing a pattern that stretched back through Sheriff Sheila's entire career. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Mayor's office. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden racing of my heart. "Mr. Davis," a woman's voice, professional and measured. "This is Connie Vasquez, assistant to Mayor Richards. The mayor would like to schedule a meeting with you regarding recent community unrest. Would tomorrow at 2 o'clock be convenient?" "Yes," I replied, surprised at how calm I sounded. "That would be fine." "Excellent. The mayor appreciates your discretion in this matter." After hanging up, I sat motionless, contemplating what had just happened. Recent community unrest, such a sanitized way of describing the revelations that were rocking our town. And discretion, was that a polite request to stop my public campaign? That evening, a notification appeared on my phone. A new comment on my original post from Harold Matthews, a retired state trooper who had moved to our town 5 years ago. What Sheriff Blackwood is doing is not law enforcement. It is intimidation. I watched your videos 3 times. There was no collision. Period. This needs to go higher than town level. State authorities should review her conduct. His comment received dozens of supportive responses, further legitimizing my case. The tide was turning. People were speaking openly now, emboldened by safety in numbers. Just before midnight, another unexpected message arrived, this one from Deputy Collins, the young officer who had been with Sheriff Sheila at the hardware store. "Mr. Davis, I cannot say much, but I want you to know not everyone in the department supports what happened. Some of us are trying to do the job right." I screenshot the message immediately, sensing its importance. Friday morning brought a new development. The Millbrook Gazette, our weekly newspaper, featured a front-page story. Sheriff's Department under scrutiny. Citizens question citation practices. The article was carefully written to appear balanced, including a statement from Sheriff Sheila. "My department stands by all official reports and citations. This is nothing more than trial by social media, orchestrated by individuals unwilling to accept responsibility for their actions." But the damage was done. Her defensive statement was dwarfed by documented accounts from multiple citizens and my irrefutable video evidence, which the newspaper had verified independently. As I prepared for my meeting with the mayor, I realized something profound had shifted in our community. Sheriff Sheila had started this in a parking lot, believing her badge made her untouchable, but she had never faced the power of public truth before. Now she would face it in the mayor's office. Mayor Richards' office was located on the second floor of our modest town hall, a century-old brick building that had witnessed generations of Millbrook's history. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying a leather portfolio containing organized printouts of every piece of evidence I had gathered. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, looked up as I entered. "Mr. Davis?" she asked. When I nodded, she continued, "The mayor is running slightly behind schedule. He should be ready for you shortly." I took a seat in the waiting area, noticing the formal portrait of Sheriff Sheila hanging among other department heads on the wall. Her expression in the photograph was stern, authoritative, the face of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. 10 minutes later, the mayor's door opened. A man in a business suit exited, nodding politely in my direction as he passed. The receptionist gestured toward the open door. "Mayor Richards will see you now." I entered the office to find Mayor Richards, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s, standing behind his desk. He extended his hand in greeting. "Mr. Davis, thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation, Mayor Richards." He gestured to a chair. "Please, have a seat. I understand you have some concerns about our sheriff's department." His choice of words, concerns rather than accusations or complaints, told me he was being diplomatic, feeling out the situation before committing to a position. "Mayor Richards," I began, opening my portfolio, "what I have are not merely concerns but documented evidence of misconduct." I laid out the materials chronologically, first my own experience, complete with time-stamped video evidence, then the growing collection of affidavits and statements from other citizens. I had organized them by type of incident: false citations, intimidation, selective enforcement, retaliatory actions. As I flipped through the pages, I watched the mayor's expression transform from political neutrality to genuine concern. He leaned forward, examining a particular statement more closely. "This is from Judge Harriman's daughter?" he asked, pointing to an affidavit. "Yes, sir. She was issued a citation for an expired registration. Her registration was valid for another 6 months. When she contested it, Sheriff Blackwood suggested that perhaps her father's position was making her feel entitled to special treatment." The mayor's jaw tightened. He continued through the documents, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished my presentation, Mayor Richards removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Davis, how many people have come forward with similar experiences?" 23 so far, with documented evidence. At least a dozen more have shared stories but are afraid to make formal statements. "Afraid," he repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. "Citizens should never fear their law enforcement officers." Before he could continue, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Excuse me for one moment." He picked up the receiver. "Yes, I see. Tell her I am in a meeting and cannot be disturbed." He hung up and smiled thinly. "Sheriff Blackwood is apparently very eager to speak with me this afternoon." "I imagine she is," I replied. The mayor studied me thoughtfully. "A local journalist has contacted my office requesting comment on this situation. I understand you have spoken with her as well." "Linda Mercer from the Gazette, yes. She is researching an article on Sheriff Blackwood's history of similar incidents." Mayor Richards nodded slowly. "Mr. Davis, I want to assure you that these allegations are being taken very seriously. I have already requested a preliminary review of citation patterns from the county clerk's office." As if on cue, his assistant entered with a folder. "The reports you requested, sir." The mayor opened the folder and scanned its contents. His expression darkened. "This shows an 80% increase in disputed citations since Sheriff Blackwood took office." He looked up at me. "I believe your concerns may be indicative of a systemic issue." Just as our meeting was concluding, my phone chimed with a notification. I checked it and could not suppress a grim smile. "It appears Sheriff Blackwood has issued me another citation," I told the mayor. "This time for online harassment and defamation of a public official. It was just delivered to my home." Mayor Richards' eyebrows rose. "That is remarkably ill-advised given the circumstances." "It shows a pattern," I pointed out. "When challenged, she escalates." The mayor stood, signaling the end of our meeting. "Mr. Davis, I would suggest you forward that new citation to the civil rights attorney I understand you have consulted. And please, keep my office informed of any further developments." As I exited town hall, my phone rang. My attorney, Michael Layton. "Robert," he said when I answered, "I just received the new citation from Sheriff Blackwood. She is panicking." "Is that good or bad for us?" I asked. "Good," he replied without hesitation. "Very good. It demonstrates a clear pattern of retaliatory behavior against a citizen exercising protected speech." He paused before adding, "This is no longer just a local matter, Robert. This is now a legal case with significant constitutional implications." I looked back at Town Hall, its American flag waving in the spring breeze. "So what happens next?" "Next," Michael's voice held a note of satisfaction. "Next, Sheriff Sheila learns that her badge does not place her above the law." The morning of the press conference arrived with a weight that settled deep in my chest. This was no longer about a citation or a bumper. This was about years of unchecked power. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror, taking a deep breath. The parking lot of City Hall was already filled with news vans. their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. "Are you ready for this?" my attorney asked, his hand steady on my shoulder as we walked toward the steps. The crowd parted as we approached. Concerned citizens, reporters clutching microphones, and curious onlookers all gathered to witness something this town had never seen before. Someone standing up to Sheriff Sheila. The mayor stood at the podium, his face drawn and serious beneath the harsh spring sunlight. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. Behind him stood 3 council members, their expressions carefully neutral. Not supporters, not yet, but no longer looking away. "Good morning," the mayor began, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "After careful consideration of substantial evidence, the City Council has unanimously voted to open an official inquiry into the conduct of Sheriff Sheila Harmon." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I watched faces register shock, relief, vindication. The mayor continued reading from his prepared statement, outlining the process that would follow: independent investigators, review of department records, interviews with citizens who had filed complaints. "We take these allegations with the utmost seriousness," he continued. "No one who wears a badge is above accountability." When my turn came to approach the microphone, my footsteps echoed across the stone steps. I placed my hands on either side of the podium, steadying myself. Camera flashes burst like lightning around me. "My name is Daniel Warren," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "3 weeks ago, Sheriff Sheila falsely accused me of damaging her patrol vehicle in a parking lot. When presented with video evidence proving this never occurred, she issued the citation anyway. When I attempted to appeal through proper channels, I was ignored." I kept my gaze level, looking directly into the cameras. This would be disturbing enough as an isolated incident, but as dozens of citizens have now come forward to share, this appears to be part of a pattern of misconduct. These are not accusations I make lightly. These are documented facts, supported by video evidence, witness statements, and department records. I gestured to the folders my attorney held, evidence compiled over sleepless nights, testimonies gathered from across town. "I stand here not out of vengeance but out of duty. When those entrusted with enforcing the law break it themselves, silence is not an option." The press erupted with questions, microphones thrust forward. I answered each one calmly, presenting facts without embellishment. No theatrics were needed. The truth was dramatic enough. That evening, Sheila held her own hastily arranged press conference outside the sheriff's department. Her uniform was immaculate, her badge gleaming under the lights. "This is nothing more than a targeted vendetta," she declared, her voice sharp with indignation. "One disgruntled citizen with an axe to grind has whipped this town into a frenzy. Trial by media is not justice." I watched her performance from my living room, noting how her hands gripped the podium too tightly, how her eyes darted between cameras. "I have served this community with distinction for 15 years, she continued. "My record speaks for itself." She was right about that much. Her record would indeed speak for itself, just not in the way she intended. The next morning, as I poured my coffee, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Mr. Warren, my name is Thomas Beck. I was deputy sheriff under Sheila for 8 years. I retired last spring." His voice was gruff, tentative. "I have some internal reports you might want to see." "What kind of reports?" I asked, setting down my mug. "Documentation of citation patterns, complaint dismissals, things that never made it to public record." He paused. "Things I should have spoken up about years ago." I closed my eyes, feeling the case shift beneath my feet like tectonic plates. Sheila's world was not just shrinking, it was collapsing. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian building downtown. I sat across from Catherine Brennan, watching as she methodically organized documents across her mahogany desk. "This goes beyond a simple case of false citation," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Based on the evidence you have provided, coupled with Mr. Beck's internal reports, we are looking at a clear pattern of malicious misuse of authority." She tapped a stack of papers with her pen. "We are filing for defamation, abuse of power, fabrication of evidence, and emotional distress," she continued. "But you should be prepared. This will not be quick and it will not be quiet." "I understand," I replied. "I did not come this far to back down now." What began as my solitary stand had transformed. 3 additional residents had joined our lawsuit, each with stories that mirrored my own. Martha Evans, a kindergarten teacher who had been issued a citation for aggressive driving when she questioned why Sheila had parked in a handicapped spot. James Thornton, whose landscaping business nearly collapsed after Sheila cited him for operating without proper permits he had prominently displayed. Rebecca Chen, a college student who received a disturbing the peace citation when she recorded Sheila questioning a homeless man. Our 4 cases became a single, powerful indictment of a system broken by one person's unchecked authority. The County Ethics Board scheduled a formal hearing for the following month. Their letter arrived in an official envelope, the seal of the county embossed in gold on heavy paper. The language was formal, bureaucratic, but the message was clear. Sheila would face judgment. 3 days later, her attorney called Catherine. "They want to settle," Catherine told me, her voice measured over the phone. "They are offering to rescind all citations, issue written apologies, and pay a nominal settlement if we drop the case immediately." "And keep everything quiet?" I asked. "That is the condition, yes." I thought about Martha, James, and Rebecca, about Thomas Beck's decades of silence, about every person who had ever walked away from Sheila's intimidation, believing they had no recourse. "No," I said firmly. "No confidential settlements, no quiet resolutions. The truth deserves daylight." Catherine paused, then said, "I thought you might say that. I already declined their offer." The investigation gained momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. County investigators requested complete access to Sheila's citation history, bodycam footage, and departmental communications. Her attorneys fought against each request, claiming procedural overreach and fishing expeditions. But public pressure mounted. Local news coverage expanded to regional outlets. Social media groups formed, where citizens shared their Sheila stories. What had begun as one contested citation had evolved into a referendum on accountability itself. At the preliminary hearing, Catherine presented our case with surgical precision. Footage played on screens around the room, my dashcam video, the hardware store's security camera, bodycam clips provided by Thomas Beck. Sheila sat with her attorneys, her expression rigid, watching as the narrative she had controlled for years slipped from her grasp. When the ethics board announced they would proceed with a full investigation and hearing, her shoulders visibly sagged. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around us. "Mr. Warren, do you believe this case will bring about systemic change?" one asked, microphone extended. I considered the question carefully. "This case is not just about one sheriff or one citation," I answered. "It is about what happens when we allow power to go unchecked, when we surrender to intimidation rather than standing for truth. Today is just the beginning." As we walked to our cars, Catherine leaned close. The investigators have requested bodycam footage from every traffic stop Sheila has conducted in the past 3 years, she said quietly. They have specifically flagged any incident involving property damage claims. The boulder was no longer rolling. It was gathering speed, heading straight for the house of cards Sheila had built. The evidence room at the county administrative building smelled of paper and dust. Investigators had compiled thousands of pages of reports, photographs, and transcripts, but it was the digital evidence that proved most damning. Catherine and I sat with two county investigators, watching bodycam footage that painted a disturbing pattern. On the screen before us, Sheila approached a silver sedan, her voice authoritative. "Sir, do you know why I pulled you over?" she asked the elderly driver. "No, ma'am, I do not," came the bewildered reply. "You struck my patrol vehicle while changing lanes," she stated firmly. "I need to see your license and registration." The camera angle shifted as Sheila walked back to her cruiser. Her voice, still captured by the microphone, spoke quietly to herself. "That ought to cover the deductible on my daughter's fender bender." I felt a chill run through me. This was not law enforcement. This was extortion wearing a badge. Video after video revealed variations of the same tactic. A claim of minor vehicle contact. No witnesses. No visible damage. Citations issued. Insurance companies notified. Small dollar settlements that were just enough to avoid legal challenge but added up substantially over time. "We have identified 11 cases that were dismissed after initial complaints," said Investigator Morales, sliding a folder across the table. "All with similar language and circumstances to yours." "And they were all dismissed quietly?" Catherine asked, paging through the documents. "Complainants were told that the citations had been reviewed and found to be justified," Morales explained. "Most gave up at that point." Later that week, a local news outlet published a bombshell. Audio recordings from Sheila's cruiser during a routine traffic stop 3 years earlier. "I did not run that stop sign," a young woman's voice protested. "Listen carefully," Sheila's voice replied, low and menacing. "I am the law in this county. If I say you ran it, you ran it. If you want to argue, I can find plenty more to cite you for." "But I did not do anything," the woman insisted, her voice trembling. "Then I will find something," Sheila responded coldly. The recording spread across social media like wildfire. Local businesses displayed printouts of transcripts in their windows. The town council called an emergency session. That evening, I received a call from the president of the police union. "Mr. Warren," he began formally, "I wanted to inform you that as of this afternoon, the union has withdrawn representation and support for Sheriff Sheila in all pending matters." "May I ask why now?" I questioned, surprised by this sudden development. He hesitated. "New evidence has come to light that makes her continued defense untenable for our organization." "What evidence?" I pressed. Another pause. "I am not at liberty to discuss that, but it will become public very soon." The next morning I understood. Front page of the local paper featured photographs of a document, a handwritten ledger detailing contributions from citation settlements, with dates and dollar amounts spanning years. The paper had received it from an anonymous source within the department. By noon, community leaders began issuing statements calling for resignation. The mayor held an impromptu press conference on the steps of City Hall. "What we have witnessed is not policing," he declared, his voice echoing across the square. "It is the systematic abuse of authority for personal gain. This administration demands immediate accountability." I watched from my office window as groups gathered downtown, some carrying homemade signs with slogans like "Badge not equal to above law" and "Justice for all." That evening, Catherine called. "The ethics board has moved up their hearing," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "They are convening tomorrow morning." "That is unusually fast," I remarked. "Not when they have everything they need," Catherine replied. "Sources tell me the vote has essentially been decided. They are just following protocol at this point." I drove home along Main Street, passing the hardware store where it all began. Just weeks ago, I had stood in that parking lot, confused and angry, watching Sheila write a citation for damage that never occurred. Now, I was witnessing the unraveling of years of corruption. At home, I poured a glass of whiskey and stepped onto my back porch. The night was clear, stars visible above the tree line. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you," it read simply. I did not recognize the sender, but I knew the sentiment. It was from someone who had been silenced by Sheila, someone who had believed they were alone in their experience. Tomorrow would bring more developments, more revelations. But tonight, I understood that this had never really been about a false citation or my insurance rates. It had been about something far more fundamental: the courage to speak truth to power, even when that power wears a badge. The county administrative building stood imposing against the morning sky, its stone facade a testament to permanence and authority. Today, however, that authority would bend toward justice. Citizens lined the hallways, filling every available seat in the hearing room. Those who could not fit inside gathered around speakers set up in the lobby. Sheila arrived flanked by attorneys, her face drawn and pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Gone was the swagger, the confident smirk, the intimidating stance. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of evidence against her. The ethics board, 7 appointed officials from across the county, filed in solemnly. The chairwoman, Dr. Elena Rivera, called the room to order. "This hearing concerns allegations of misconduct against Sheriff Sheila Harmon," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Before we proceed, I must note that Sheriff Harmon has been placed on administrative suspension pending the outcome of these proceedings." A murmur spread through the crowd. This was the first public confirmation of Sheila's suspended status. The next 4 hours unfolded methodically. Evidence presented, testimony delivered, questions asked and answered. Catherine presented our case with relentless precision, while Sheila's attorneys offered increasingly desperate objections. During a brief recess, I stood in the hallway, stretching my legs. A deputy I did not recognize approached me. "I just wanted to say," he began awkwardly, "not all of us are like her. Some of us actually became officers to help people." I nodded, extending my hand. I never thought otherwise. When the board returned from deliberation, their faces were grave but resolved. Dr. Rivera adjusted the microphone before speaking. "After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this board finds that Sheriff Sheila Harmon has engaged in a pattern of misconduct unbecoming of her office and in violation of her oath. The vote is unanimous. We recommend immediate and permanent removal from office, revocation of law enforcement certification, and referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." The room erupted, not in cheers, but in a collective exhale, as if the entire community had been holding its breath for years. Sheila sat motionless, staring straight ahead as her attorneys whispered urgently in her ear. 2 weeks later, we stood in district court for the final hearing in our civil lawsuit. Judge Harrison Mercer presided, his weathered face impassive as he reviewed the settlement terms. "The court finds these terms acceptable," he pronounced. "The record of all parties shall be expunged of falsified citations. The defendant shall issue public apologies to each plaintiff. Restitution in the amount specified shall be paid within 30 days." He leaned forward, removing his glasses. "And for the record, this settlement shall be public. No confidentiality clauses, no sealed records. The people deserve to know when the system has failed them and when it has corrected itself." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around us. Martha, James, Rebecca, and I stood together, bound by shared experience and vindication. "What happens now?" a reporter called out. "Justice happens now," Catherine replied, "and hopefully reform follows." That evening, I received a call from the mayor's office, inviting me to speak at a town forum on civic responsibility and oversight. They wanted me to share my experience, to help others understand the importance of standing firm against injustice. In the days that followed, Sheila vanished from public life. Her house was listed for sale, her social media accounts deleted. Some said she moved to Arizona, others claimed Florida. The truth was, no one really cared. Her power over the town had evaporated, leaving only the fading memory of fear. 1 month after the court decision, I passed the sheriff's department and noticed the new sign being installed: Sheriff Thomas Beck. The former deputy who had broken his silence had been appointed interim sheriff until the special election. I pulled into the parking lot and approached as workers finished mounting the sign. "Looks good," I said to Beck, who stood supervising the installation. He turned, offering a firm handshake. "Different times ahead," he said simply. "Better times," I replied. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "for years I watched her operate, knowing something was wrong but afraid to speak up. I told myself it was not my place, not my fight." "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand there is no such thing as not my fight when it comes to justice," he answered. "That is a lesson I learned from you." I shook my head. "Not from me, from all of us who finally decided enough was enough." As I walked back to my car, I realized that Sheila's shadow no longer stretched across our streets. Her badge, once a symbol of intimidation, had been reclaimed as what it should always have been: a promise of protection and fairness. Autumn arrived with a palette of golden hues and crisp mornings. 6 months had passed since the hearings. The hardware store had strung festive lights around its entrance in preparation for the Harvest Festival. Life in town had settled into a new rhythm, one without the constant anxiety of spotting a particular patrol car in the rearview mirror. I pulled into the store's parking lot, smiling at the memory of how it all began. The spot where Sheila had confronted me was now occupied by a young mother loading bags of mulch into her minivan. I offered to help, and she accepted gratefully. "You are Daniel Warren, are not you?" she asked as we finished loading. "The one who stood up to Sheriff Sheila." "That is me," I admitted, somewhat uncomfortable with the recognition that still followed me around town. "My husband got 3 bogus tickets from her last year," she said. "Nearly lost his commercial license because of it. What you did, it mattered to a lot of families around here." I nodded, thanking her before heading inside. These encounters had become common, people sharing their stories, expressing gratitude. Each one reminded me how deeply Sheila's misconduct had affected our community. Inside, I greeted the store manager, who had provided the security footage that proved crucial to my case. "Council meeting tonight, right?" he asked, ringing up my purchases. "That is right," I confirmed. "Voting on the new transparency measures for the sheriff's department." After the case concluded, I had found myself increasingly involved in local governance. What began as one man's stand against injustice had evolved into ongoing civic engagement. I had been appointed to a Citizens Oversight Committee for Law Enforcement, a new entity created in the wake of Sheila's removal. The committee had drafted comprehensive reforms: mandatory bodycam footage retention, independent review of all property damage claims, citizen access to citation records, and quarterly public reporting of department activities. Tonight, the town council would vote on implementing these measures permanently. As I loaded my purchases into my trunk, Sheriff Beck pulled into the lot, waving as he recognized me. "Ready for tonight?" he asked, walking over. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied. "How is the department taking the proposed changes?" Beck smiled. "Better than you might expect. Good officers have nothing to fear from transparency. It protects them as much as it protects citizens." That was the most surprising outcome of the past months, the realization that most officers welcomed accountability. With Sheila gone, many had come forward with stories of how her leadership had poisoned department culture, how they had felt pressured to follow her example or face retaliation. "See you tonight," Beck said, heading into the store. That afternoon, I drove to the local youth center where I had been invited to speak. 20 teenagers sat in plastic chairs, some looking interested, others scrolling on phones. "My name is Daniel Warren," I began. "6 months ago, I was falsely accused of damaging a police vehicle. Today, I want to talk to you about knowing your rights when interacting with authority figures." For the next hour, I explained the basics of civil rights, the proper channels for reporting misconduct, and the importance of documentation. As I spoke, I noticed more phones being put away, more eyes engaging. "The most important thing to remember," I concluded, "is that respect for authority does not mean blind obedience. It means holding those in power to the same standards they enforce on others." A young girl raised her hand. "But what if nobody believes you? What if it is just your word against theirs?" "That is why evidence matters," I explained. "In my case, it was video footage, but it can also be witness statements, documentation, or simply the consistency of your account. And remember, you are never as alone as they want you to believe." After the talk, the center director approached me. "Would you consider making this a regular thing?" she asked. "These kids need to hear this, especially from someone who has been through it." I found myself agreeing without hesitation. If my experience could help the next generation navigate encounters with authority more effectively, then perhaps some good had come from those difficult days. That evening, the town council chambers were packed. Citizens filled every seat, with more standing along the walls. When the vote came for the transparency measures, it passed unanimously, a testament to how deeply the community had been affected by Sheila's years of unchecked power. As I walked home under streetlights, I reflected on the journey of the past months. What had begun with a false accusation in a parking lot had catalyzed genuine change. Our town had reclaimed its sense of fairness, its belief in accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "District Attorney just announced criminal charges against Sheila. Fraud, extortion, evidence tampering. Thought you should know." I stopped walking for a moment, letting the news settle. This was not about vengeance. It was about justice running its full course. The next morning, I drove past the hardware store again. I parked in the same spot where months earlier, Sheila had confronted me with her false accusation. I stepped out, looking around at the peaceful scene, customers coming and going, the morning sun warming the asphalt. This ordinary parking lot had become, for me, a reminder of an extraordinary truth, that one person, armed with evidence and determination, could stand against corruption and prevail. That justice, though sometimes slow, was always worth pursuing. I walked into the store, greeted by name by the cashier. Just another day in a town that had remembered how to breathe freely again.